Here's a quick video reviewing the view evidentialism, which is the one Connie and Feldman defend in their paper. So what does evidentialism say? Well, it says, as they say, a doxastic attitude toward a proposition is justified for a person if and only if that doxastic attitude toward that proposition fits the evidence the person has. So doxastic attitude, as we talked about, is sort of a fancy word for belief-like attitude. It could be belief, disbelief, suspension of judgment. And what this is essentially saying is, to be justified, that attitude has to fit the evidence. This is an internalist picture of justification, because it says what matters is the evidence you have, the evidence sort of available to you. That is what that is what determines whether or not you're justified. So it's something you could have access to, as we said before. So here are some examples just to make this clear. So my belief that France is in Europe is epistemically justified according to the evidentialist because I have overwhelming evidence in favor of the proposition that France is in Europe. If I suspend judgment on whether flipping the coin I have in front of me will result in a heads or a tails, it's epistemically justified because my evidence makes it equally likely that it will land heads or that it won't land heads. And so I'm epistemically justified in suspending judgment, according to the evidentialists. And after I make the toss, I'm justified in believing whatever it lands. Say it lands heads, I'm justified in believing that it's heads because my evidence changed. And now it supports belief. Finally, it's epistemically justified for me to disbelieve that the sky is green, because my evidence says that it's very unlikely that the sky is green. Again, what's important here is not these simple examples. Those aren't supposed to be deep. What they're supposed to show is that it's evidence. It's your evidence about the truth of the proposition that determines whether or not you're justified in your belief, your suspension of judgment, or your disbelief. I want to just point out that when many people first read this, they think this is just extremely natural. Like, why are we even writing a paper on this? It's just so obvious. Like, whether or not your belief is justified depends on your evidence for that thing and only your evidence for that thing. Like, what else could it depend on? Why even think of this as contentious? I think that's a very natural thing to wonder. But hopefully, in reading that piece further along, you saw some objections to it. And also in reading Goldman's piece, you begin to see what an alternative might look like. But I do think it's worth bringing out how just natural on a first read this evidentialist position is.